It's so good to see you.
Thank you. There's Ella, Monica, Jennifer, Daniel, and Carol, but I can't see them.
And some people will log in. Let's go ahead and get started because Sabrina started live streaming us. I want to thank you, Mo, so much for joining us today. I know when I first met you back in 1997, I had no idea who you were, and then when you started talking, I just was amazed with your power and your energy. So I thank you for joining us. We're going to go through and just talk about your life a little bit, and then at the end, what I'd like to do is open it up for questions, so our agents can ask you questions and learn about you. When COVID first hit, and we started going through kind of the struggling and adversity, one of the things I wanted to do was find someone who could talk to our agents about adversity, find someone who'd really been hit hard and gone through some challenges. And as I thought about who that might be, Mo, you were at the top of my list.
Well, I've had a lot.
You've had a lot, and you were someone who you've had a lot, but you came out of them in a big way. And so I thank you for being willing to share with our guys today. I want to just give people a little bit of a background. You are the vice chairman of the board of Keller Williams, that you were the CEO who in 10 years took it from a company that was local based just in Austin that probably very few people had heard of to number 3 in the industry and a national leader. And later on we became number 1. I know in Oklahoma, you built an office to really the top of a big system. And for 2 years, you served as the chairwoman for the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission. You're honored to be the businesswoman of the year for the whole state twice. Now, even with all those accolades, Mo, you really started out your life a little differently. You were a tenant farmer's daughter. And I know you didn't have much money, and I've heard your story and read your book. So share with us what it was like kind of starting out when you were growing up. How was that?
Well, I was raised in poverty, and I knew we were poor. You know, a lot of people back in that era would say, well, you know, we didn't have anything, but I didn't know I was poor. Well, folks, I knew I was poor. So there was a big difference between me and them. But 2 things happened to me when I was a child that really made a difference in my life. And today I can say I am really thankful I grew up in poverty. Number 1, I developed a work ethic that I'll put up against anybody, even at the age I am now. Because you remember, 2 days before Red Day, I'll be 83, and I can still work. And so developing that work ethic on that farm was the greatest asset I had when Gary accidentally found me and asked me to come to Austin and help him. Number 2, I was very young when I decided I was sick and tired of poor, and that when I grew up, I was going to make more money than I needed so that I could give the extra money I had, I could give it away, because my father was this tremendous role model in giving away his time to help people, but he could never give any money because he never had any money. And so those 2 things happened to me as a child in poverty. You ask, what was it like? Well, remember, Oklahoma is in Tornado Alley. We're located where the crosswinds come together, and so it creates turbulence in the atmosphere. And so as a child, we would often go to the cellar. And if any of you have ever been in a cellar on a farm in a rural area, it's dark, it's kind of damp, it has a lot of cobwebs, it's really scary. And we would go into the cellar during those storms. And I can remember being quite young, and I would just pray that the storm wouldn't destroy our crop. And so then when the storm was over, my father would open the cellar door and we would hold our breath to see if the crop was still there, if we could see. Sometimes it would be cloudy and you couldn't really see that much. And how relieved we were if we still had a crop. I can recall 3 years when storms destroyed our crops, not just from tornadoes, but from hail, and the strong winds with the hail would just devastate a crop. And I would watch him, and he never gave up. He continued to get odd jobs to pay for our school supplies or to buy one pair of new shoes because our old shoes had holes in the bottom of the sole. And so those experiences shape you. For example, that experience really made fear kind of a part of our life. And just as everybody felt in the pandemic, fear at the beginning, you're fearful that you won't have enough money to last through the pandemic. You're fearful your buyers will back out, your sellers will back out. You know how fear works.
Sure.
And when you are raised in that kind of an environment, you tend to have a bit more fear than you do when you're in a more secure environment.
Wow. Sounds like just a hard way to grow up, but some good lessons. So let's talk about, did you stay on the farm or did you want to go to school? I know your family didn't have any money. And I know
I wanted to go to school, and I was the first child in generations that got to do that. And I was able to do that because I got a scholarship at a small women's college in Oklahoma, and they helped me find a job. I worked about 35 hours a week, carried a full load. And then after 1 year at that school, I decided it probably would be better if I got a degree from the University of Oklahoma, because it was a larger, more prominent school in our state. And the same was true. I got a small scholarship there, and I found a job on my own. So I worked my way through school. Had to get a few loans, but
you did what
I
you needed.
basically put myself through.
So, and I know you wanted to be a music teacher and a music major, but you weren't able to do that. Why couldn't you get that certification? Can you tell us that story?
I really, really had a passion to be a public school music teacher. And when I transferred to OU, I learned that that wasn't going to happen because I worked in the late afternoon on into the evening, and I didn't finish with my job until about 9:30, a quarter of 10 at night. And they closed the practice rooms at 10 o'clock in the old days.
Wow.
I didn't have the money to rent a piano. I didn't have the money to buy a piano. I even tried to get people to give me an old piano, and I never could, that didn't happen. So I just changed my major to elementary education and gave up that dream. But when you have a dream in your DNA, it's going to come true in spite of the circumstances. And on my very first job interview, the principal of that school said, "Mo, would you consider the possibility of teaching music?" I nearly fell on the floor and fainted. And I said, yes, I would consider it. So I got to be a music teacher anyway. Isn't that exciting?
Isn't it funny? It still was there. You didn't give up and you persevered, and it happened.
Well, I learned a lesson that if the dream's really in your DNA, God's going to make it come true. Doesn't matter what the circumstances are.
So you became one of the leaders of one of the most powerful children's choirs in all of Oklahoma. That was a continuation of your dream. How did you make that happen, or how did you become that teacher?
Well, they came from the other side of the tracks. Do y'all know what that means? It means they're the poor kids in town. And it was really wonderful because I grew up poor, so I know all about being poor. So when those kids came to me, it was back in the days when you could really have high expectations, you could have standards. They had to behave in your classroom. You know, if I were teaching today, I'd be put in prison and accused of child abuse. But back then, you could discipline children. Now you can't. You know, you can't touch them, you can't shake them, you can't stick your finger in their face. You can't do anything, or teachers will be sued. So I had high standards, and I told the kids, I said, just because you're struggling does not mean I'm going to give you an inch. You don't get an inch. I want you to learn what it feels like to do something really well. It's so well done. And I want you to learn what it feels like to do that. We're going to have the best choir of any choir in Oklahoma. You're going to be the best, and I will not accept mediocrity from you. I will only accept excellence. So see, do you get that? You have a standard, you create a picture, and you create a vision. And those kids just worked their little tails off for me. And then I would go cheer for the little boys when they played football, and the little girls when they played softball. And then they'd come and sing for me like birds. I had them every day for 30 minutes, so I was able to teach them a lot. And I taught them how to sight read. And I'll never forget when they asked us to come and demonstrate our sight reading ability at the Oklahoma Music Teachers Association. They did so well. They looked at music they had never seen before, and they sang it. They sight read it. It was just amazing. And a lot of the people in the audience just couldn't believe it was really true, and they accused us of practicing it before we got there, and we hadn't. And they were that good, and I knew how to get them to sing on tune, so I didn't have any kids off tune. And it was just so exciting. I loved that period in my life, and it really prepared me for the real estate industry, because I learned the importance of having standards and sticking to them.
Well said. And that's one thing that I know about you is your standards are not bendable. They're standards, and
they're not negotiable.
Non-negotiable. No. So let's talk about real estate, because right after that, you decided in the 70s that you were going to get into real estate. And tell us about your beginnings. Were you like an instant success overnight? Was it phenomenal?
I was the biggest failure that ever entered the business. It took me, I don't know, it took me a year to get anything to happen. And we didn't have good training back then. And it was 1974 when I entered the business. I really didn't want to get in the business because I loved my teaching. And do you want me to tell that story, Deb?
I want you to tell that story, Mo.
Well, I went from January till the latter part of August before I ever had a deal. And I think I've gone the longest of anybody in the history of Keller Williams. That's how long I failed. And during that period, I would get so frustrated. I would cry a lot, go home in the evenings and cry because nothing happened during the day. And my manager would dump me out in the middle of a subdivision and tell me to knock on doors and give them a card. And I didn't know what I was supposed to say when I knocked on a door. It was just horrible. So prayer is kind of an important part of my life. And so about the first part of August, I just got really mad at God. And when I'm mad at him, I tell him. And I said, you know what? I am the most frustrated human being on the face of the earth because I've given this business from January till the 1st of August and nothing has happened. And I only have one listing. That's it. Boy, what a big deal after all these months. And I said, so here's the deal. Now that's terrible. You should never talk to God like that. And it's a wonder he didn't strike me down with lightning. Well, I guess he did years later when lightning struck our house and it burned down. But anyway, I said, here's the deal. I want 3 valid deals. Valid. Not deals that fall through. I want 3 that will close before the end of August, or I am out of here and I'm going to go back to school, get my master's, and go back into teaching. Now that's terrible. Don't ever do that, but I did it. So on the 28th day of August, somebody bought my only listing, and that kind of struck a little fire in my heart. I thought, oh, maybe I won't fail after all. You know, I've got 1 deal under contract and I knew they'd close and it looked really solid. So the 29th day of August came, and on that day, believe it or not, I had a little couple referred to me who were brand new home buyers. And I got a lender to pre-qualify them and all that stuff. And by 3 o'clock that afternoon, I had sold them a house. And they were pre-qualified, so it looked really solid. And man, that fire in my heart got really big. And I thought, oh, you know what? Maybe I can have 3 deals. So now the 30th day of August of 1974 came, and nothing happened. And here I am in a brand new town, don't know a soul, still don't know people, even though I'd lived there since January. So the last day of August, August the 31st, 1974 came, and I got up that morning mad at him. And I said, God, why did you give me 2 deals? Are you just teasing me? Why didn't you give me 0 or 1? That would have been better than tempting me with 2. That's just awful. So I had on my blue jeans and I did what a lot of women do, not everybody, but a lot of women do when they're frustrated. And that is I vacuumed. Listen, I pushed that vacuum cleaner around the house with all the anger that I could muster. At 10 o'clock, my phone rings. It's my real estate office wanting me to go show this couple a property in my subdivision because the listing agent and her assistant were both out of town. I go show it's not the right house, and I say, hey, let's go a few blocks away. There's a house I want you to see. We walk in that house and the magic happens. They move the kids in the bedrooms and they move the furniture, and you've been there, you've done that. You know what that's like and how exciting it is. I am beside myself because I know I have my third deal. We walk outside, the couple go in the far corner of the front yard and they start talking to each other, and I'm getting really nervous inside because I don't know what they're talking about. And they talk and talk. And finally, Mr. Buyer comes over to me and he looks at me and he says, "Mo, we would love to buy the house from you, but we have to buy it through Lily Mae Tillman. She's shown us property for 2 weeks. She has purchased breakfast for us, lunch for us, dinner for us. We just can't treat her that way and not buy the house through her." Now, back in those days, I knew that was technically and legally my deal, but I'm not about to make anybody buy through me that doesn't want to buy through me. So they get in their car, they drive away, and I go home and cry and cry and cry because I had come so close. And I think I bawled all day long. And that evening at 7 o'clock, my phone rings and it's Mr. Buyer. And he says, "Mo, we have talked to Lily Mae Tillman. She said we needed to do the right thing." Have you ever heard of that before? Where did you hear of it? In Keller Williams. In the Y4C2Ts. It's the second letter, the I, integrity, do the right thing. They said she told us to do the right thing and buy the house from you. Well, by midnight, I had the third deal. The next 6 months, I closed 35 transactions because my mindset changed. I got all the stinking thinking out of my mind and believed I could do it, believed I was in God's will, believed I was supposed to do this. 35 deals. If I'd done that the first 6 months, I'd have had a 70 deal year. That's the story. Can you imagine what I felt in my soul and in my heart when Gary Keller first showed me the Y4C2Ts and I saw integrity, do the right thing? I mean, I had chilly bumps all over my body.
Wow. Every time I hear Lily Mae Tillman, it resonates. It's a great story, and it's a great.
That woman, she taught me the greatest lesson I ever learned in business. And that was when you do the right thing, you change the course of a person's life. Because I didn't go get my master's and go back into teaching. I stayed in the business, and look what the path was that was in store for me, and I had no idea.
Pretty amazing, and how that could have shifted and how so many people could not have known you and the lives you may not have impacted. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. So you became very successful. You opened your own office. You don't do anything in a small way. And even though you were in Edmond, Oklahoma, somehow you made your Century 21 office number 3 out of 7,000 offices.
7,500 offices in the US and Canada.
And Edmond, Oklahoma, you became.
Isn't that exciting?
Number 3. It's something to be proud of. And then you sold it and sold off to Merrill Lynch for over $1 million, which was a ton of money back then. And then what happened?
Well, and then Merrill Lynch decided to sell to Prudential. And see, I had been running their operation in the Oklahoma City area. And what's kind of funny about that is I did a startup for them I did a turnaround. They already had one office here and it was failing. It was not succeeding. So I turned that office around. I did an acquisition for them, where I negotiated to buy, or for Merrill Lynch to buy this office on South Side. And then I did a startup. Of course, they bought my office and it was highly, highly successful. And I had no idea that all of those experiences were actually preparing me for Keller Williams, but I didn't know Keller Williams existed. And so when they decided to sell to Prudential, they tried to get me to buy all of those offices back. And I didn't want to buy them back because I didn't want to be Prudential. I certainly have respect for the company, but I read their document and it was just the same old traditional real estate. And I knew in my heart that the business needed to change. Remax had just come on the scene, and I realized how valuable Remax was to the top agents. And I knew that somehow there was going to be more change in the business. I just didn't know for sure what that change would look like. So I opted not to buy back those offices. So I left, and I had a 2-year non-compete. So I started a consulting training company. And that's what I did after that.
You had a whole bunch of cash, and then what happened to your cash?
Well, we lost it all because in the late 80s, OPEC lowered the price of oil to $8 a barrel. Now, folks, last week it went negative. So to sell a barrel of oil, you had to pay someone to take it. And that's the first time that's happened in the history of the world. But anyway, the economy crashed in the late 80s, just like it's crashed this time. Only this time, the government killed it. I mean, they just killed our economy, whereas this crash was really just in the oil patch in the late 80s, like Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Colorado, those states. That's considered to be the oil patch. We lost the money we had saved, from the sale and everything. We lost all of our investments. We were on the verge of bankruptcy. And it was just the most horrible, scariest time you could hope to imagine. We ended up $1.3 million in debt, $1,300,000 in debt. It was awful. It was just like that alligator was nipping at our feet, and he was huge. Because $1.3 million for us was enormous. And, the money from the sale was gone, and because we were trying to keep up the payments on the real estate developments we were involved in. It was just horrible. And I kept saying to our friends, we're going to build back, and it's going to be bigger than ever. And the first 1,000 times I said it, I did not believe it. But I said it anyway. And finally, about 1,500 times, I began to believe it. And one morning I got up and I said, Richard, you know what? We are going to build back. And it is going to be larger than before. And I realized that I began to believe it when I got the fear out of my head. When I got that fear kicked out, then I began to believe what I was professing with my mouth. I want to tell you that 2 weeks later, from the day I said that, a man named Gary Keller called me out of the blue. And
Tell
you
us-
know the rest of the story.
Yeah, I don't think they know the rest of the story. How did you get connected with Gary and how did that even work?
Here's how. First, let me say, in every single adversity, there is opportunity, but you will never see the opportunity if your head is filled with fear. He calls 2 weeks later, and I can truthfully say that losing our money in the late 80s is the greatest thing that has ever happened to us in our business life, because it set up a set of circumstances that caused him to accidentally find me. And the real way it happened is, as a consultant, I set up this little consulting company. I made $75,000 my first year, and it kept food on the table and it kept the house payment going. And we were real close to having it paid off. Anyway, a friend showed let me back up. A person showed up at my door when in my consulting company, and I'd never met him before. They had moved to Oklahoma City from Dallas. Her name was Jean Lowell. You probably remember her, Debbie.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I hear you have a consulting company. And I told her all about it. And I told her, I said, I'm headed to Dallas next week to consult with Mike Bowman, who owned the largest Century 21 office in the US. She said, oh, Mo, can I go with you? And I said, well, I'd love to have you. I mean, I just met her. And so she went with me. And on the way to Dallas in the car, she said, I want to know if we would have time to stop by some office that's called Keller Williams. She says, I don't know anything about it, but my precious real estate agent that I used to have in my own company that I owned with Dick Dillingham and Mike Brody, she said that little agent is the manager of this Keller something office. Now, a stranger, God brought a stranger to my office who asked if she could go with me to Dallas. Well, I mean, that's crazy. Well, we visit with her little friend, and the office is cute. It's lovely. The people are friendly. They're nice. I'd never heard of Keller Williams. I thought it was just owned by somebody in Dallas named Keller and Williams. I didn't know. Jean didn't either. But she told me about Keller Williams. We left there. And I thought, well, I'll never, it was nice seeing that little office. How nice, that was it. And she picks up the phone, calls Gary Keller and says, you need to meet this woman. And so 2 weeks after I'd said that to my husband, he calls.
Tell me what happened when he called.
Well, he just calls me like 4 times a week. He wasn't annoying. I mean, I didn't get tired of it because every conversation was so exciting and so stimulating and so interesting. And then he wants to know if he can come to Oklahoma City and meet me. And that's when I had him pictured in my head as being 50 years old and having graying hair and being this brilliant, amazing, tall, 6'6" man. And he walks off the plane, and here's this little this little kid that walks up to me, and the first thing out of my mouth is, I am old enough to be your mother. And we laugh about that to this day. But anyway, we meet, he comes up here to Oklahoma, we meet, then he goes back, he keeps calling me. And like a month or two later, I've forgotten exactly when it was, he calls me one day and he says, Mo, I want you to come to Austin for a 3-day meeting. I'm thinking about taking this company national. In my head, I'm going, I don't have the money to buy an airplane ticket. I don't have the money. Remember, Mo, you're broke. I don't have the money to pay for a hotel room. I don't have the money to pay for food. In fact, I don't even have enough money to pay for the gasoline to drive to Austin. Because, you know, I had just started my consulting company and everything was kind of new and I was just broke. And he says, will you come? And I said, I will be there. I hung up that phone at the end of that call and I thought, I've got myself in the biggest mess. I said, Richard, how am I going to go? And he said, I don't know. Good luck. And so that afternoon, I went to my mailbox to get the mail. And in the mail was a credit card that had been sent to me by some company because they didn't know yet I was broke. I got that credit card, I activated that sucker, and I bought me a plane ticket to Austin. I paid for the hotel with that credit card. I bought my food with that credit card. And I shuddered to think what my life and your life would have been like if I hadn't said I would go to Austin. Think about that for a minute.
Wow. So
because he was struggling in the company. He was struggling. And when he asked me to, well, let me finish the story. So I go to Austin, and on the first day, he shows all of us, the consulting company and a few of us who were there. He shows the Agent Leadership Council model. I knew that would work because I had the same thing in the company I sold to Merrill Lynch. I just didn't call it an Agent Leadership Council, but it operated exactly like his model. Then he showed me the profit share model. Well, guess what? I knew that would work because I profit shared in our company 2 levels, not 7, but 2. And I understood the synergy that could create. And I understood all about that. I knew it would work. Then he shows me his economic model, and it blows me away because I realized the moment I saw it that it was probably almost recession-proof, And I am going, my model is stupid compared to his economic model. I want to plug into his head, and I want to get to use these models. So that evening at 5 o'clock, I went up to my hotel room. I called my husband and I said, are you sitting down? And he knows what that means. It means Mo's off to do some other crazy thing. So I said, Richard, I am going to build Keller Williams in Oklahoma. I'm going to open a region. Gary doesn't know it yet. I'm going to tell him in the morning. And Richard said, what are you going to use for money? And I said, I don't have a clue where the money's going to come from, but I was born to do this. Interesting, huh?
yeah.
And so the next morning, Gary comes and I said, Gary, I don't want to talk anymore about a training contract. I want to open Keller Williams in Oklahoma. He said, Mo, I don't even have a document yet. I said, it doesn't matter. Oklahoma is not a registration state. All you have to do is write me a letter and say I can use your models and systems. We'll do the document later. And he was hesitant, and I stuck out my hand. And he finally shook my hand and he said, okay. I went into business with him on a handshake. And as we shook our hands, I said, my daddy taught me that a handshake is more sacred than a contract. We did,
Wow.
we did the document later, and the rest is history.
So how did you open a region when you had no money? You were broke.
I talked him into letting me pay him as I opened the offices, which back then was legal. I think the franchise laws have changed, and you can't do that now, but back then it was legal and you could.
Wow. So you later became the CEO of Keller Williams.
3 years
And
later.
3 years later, and it was losing money. It had many people, big time losing money. It had a bunch of people that didn't get the models or the systems. And it took you 2 or 3 years to clean it up. And during that time, you made lots of changes and you earned the nickname, the Velvet Hammer.
Right.
I want you to talk about that time.
Well, when I went down there in 1995, I got the Oklahoma region up and going. Roll Sargent was the regional director back then of Oklahoma, later Sherry Lewis. And when I got to Austin, Gary was really sick. He was ill, and he had kind of a serious illness. And he had worked himself to death because he was trying to do so much of it alone, because he was spending all of the money he got out of those 2 market centers to give birth to the national company. And so the first year I was there, I did not see him very much. Now, keep in mind, I was 57 years old when I moved to Austin. I met him when I was 54, and I was 57. My children were already grown and gone, and Richard could not move to Austin because he was finishing an advanced degree. He was getting a doctoral pharmacy degree. So I didn't have the pressure of family there. And I inherited a staff of 7 people, and I dehired 4 of them. There were 1,800 agents in the entire company. There were 45 offices. I closed 15 of those offices. And that means we had 30 offices. And out of those 30 offices, I put pressure on OPs to dehire 17 team leaders because they weren't performing. And then I ended up a little later foreclosing on 5 regions. And I got brand new people in those regions, and then they begin to grow. 10 years later, when I turned this company over to that precious Mark Willis, we had 50,000 agents and we had 530 offices. And I tell Gary, I say, Gary, I have a trophy for what I did for you the first 10 years. Now, Gary got better physically. The doctors helped him get better. So by the 2nd year, he became involved again in the company. But I tell him, I say, I have a trophy. I say, look at it. Here it is, Gary. It's right here. Can you all see that? That spot right here? That's a pacemaker. My trophy was a pacemaker. I'm telling you, folks, I paid a price for those first 4 years. I have a pacemaker to show for it.
Well, and you were intense in what you were doing. I remember when I
Yeah,
started
and I
the
was
company.
totally out of balance the whole 4 years. That's why I ended up with a pacemaker. I mean, don't do that. But I knew I had to do what I had to do to get the ship turned around and headed the right direction down the stream, if you know what I mean.
And it was fast, Mo. I remember when I joined, there was 3,000 agents, and our
Right.
region, we had 15 people in Vegas, and we were failing miserably.
Right.
Why did they call you the Velvet Hammer?
Well, because I would go to these owners when I closed offices and I would say, I really care about you. I am concerned that you have used up all your savings and now you've dipped into your retirement fund. And my conscience will not allow me to let you lose any more money. I respect your capital more than you do. No, you can't lose any more money. It's not fair to your family. It's not fair to you. So you have 30 days to either turn this office around or sell it to someone we would approve. And of course, I knew most of those offices were not saleable because they weren't making any money. And so at the end of 30 days, I would close them. But see, I would love on them. And then I would deal with the issue and then I would love on them some more. So the people I closed ended up still liking me, if you know what I'm saying. And that was when they started calling me the Velvet Hammer, because there was the love, then the hammer would come out and then there would be some more love. It broke my heart to have to do that, but I knew I had to for their sake.
It's interesting. You've had so much adversity, just time after time, and you just always keep on getting up again and again. Time after time. I want to talk about when I remember when you were first building your house and all the planning and the preparation and everything that went into that to make it just this magnificent estate. Years of planning, and tell us what happened 2 weeks before you were going to move into it.
It burned down. Lightning struck it and it hit a gas line that was still uncovered. And then it shot up through the gas line and started in one of the upstairs rooms and it burned to the ground. And the death of a dream. Remember, the house I lived in growing up, the snakes came in, the rats came in, the snow came in, and the rain came in. So this dream of having a lovely home was huge for me. And I learned in the death of a dream, you grieve like you do when you lose a person. When you lose a family member, you grieve. So you go through a grieving process. And as you go through that grieving process, you run into all these dream bullies. Oh, well, God didn't want you to have that house anyway, I guess. Or, oh, the things they say to you, you just can't believe. And I'd say, you don't understand. This was a dream from the time I was a child. It's just that Keller Williams enabled the house to be a little bit prettier, a little bit bigger, have a little more, yard in it. And so I learned about dream bullies during that period of time. And so anyway, the house burned down.
And what'd you do?
The first person I called was Gary, and I was crying, and I said, Gary, my house burned down last night. And he said, so? And I said, well, I'm disappointed. And he said, go build it again. And so ultimately we made the decision to build it again. And I've just loved living in it. Every morning I wake up and I just can't believe that when I'm in Oklahoma, I just can't believe that, you know, I have a beautiful home. But you know, Deb, talking about adversity, there are a lot of stories I didn't put in my book because I didn't want to embarrass my kids and my husband. But two, if I can tell them to you really, really quick. Have any of you been through Bold and you did that crazy exercise? If you act enthusiastic, you will be enthusiastic. And most everybody who does that just thinks, you know, it's the stupidest thing in the world, but they just do it. Well, I want to give you the backstory. That is in bold because I asked them to put it in bold. And I had never heard the expression, if you act enthusiastic, you will be enthusiastic, until much later in my life. But when I was a school teacher, I had just married Richard, and Richard had serious depression for the first 15 years of our marriage. And I didn't put this in the book because I didn't want to, you know, embarrass him. But if you've never lived with anybody with depression, or you've never had depression yourself, you cannot begin to comprehend how dark and, well, insidious that disease is. It's a tough one. And I was overwhelmed because I didn't know how to help him. I didn't know how to take care of everything, you know, pay all the bills, take care of the kids, teach, cook 2 meals a day, and on and on and on. So I was just in a state of being overwhelmed. And I was about 5 years into the depression. We had one car and he took it to work, and he could barely work. When he got home from work, he was totally drained. Just drained. And so when I'd walk to school, I'd walk the first few blocks and I'd cry the whole way because inside I was hurting so badly. And I'd get within 1 block of the school and I'd stop crying, get my Kleenex, wipe my eyes. I'd get to the school and my hand would touch the handle of the door. And from that moment on, I would act enthusiastic. Now, was I really enthusiastic? No, I was about as enthusiastic as a dead slug. I was hurting on the inside, hurting, but I acted like I wasn't. I did that for years during that period of depression. Now, the doctors found out what was wrong and they were able to fix it, and he's been fine all these years. You've seen him at family reunion and he's good to go. But I will never forget one morning about 5 years into the depression, when I was in my classroom, I looked at the clock in the back of the room, like they always had in the old days, a clock in the back of the room. And I realized I really was enthusiastic. I could feel the energy in my body. I was excited about what I was doing with my kids, and that energy and that enthusiasm that I've always had was there. And I thought, I really am enthusiastic. Now, I had practiced acting for how many years? Well, for 5. And I know I got to school about 7:30 every morning. So I'd practiced it from 7:30 till 10 a.m. And I learned the biggest aha I've ever learned. that I acted enthusiastic long enough for it to finally become a reality. And the second thing I learned was that me being okay in the midst of adversity was not dependent on my husband. It was not dependent on my kids. It was not dependent on my friends. It was only dependent on this relationship, the relationship with my maker. And if I stayed focused on my maker and I spent time in that relationship, then I could still have peace and joy above the adversity. That's why I called my book A Joy-Filled Life, is because in the midst of all that's happened to me through the years, we had a son who was alcoholic. Now, let me tell you, if you think that one's fun, you're crazy. That one's tough too. And I could go on at the adversity I've experienced in my life, but I've learned you can rise above it. And then in every adversity, there's opportunity, but you can't see it if you're filled with all that fear and turmoil.
Well said, Mo. I pulled your book out this weekend and read it again because it's a great book. And at the end of it, you were talking about Richard and connecting the dots. Will you talk about that for a little bit? I know we're going to be out of time. If we can talk about that and maybe the 4 truths.
Well, I can go, like 5 minutes over if you all want to go over.
I don't think anybody would leave.
Well, they might.
They won't.
Well, in connecting the dots, it's like I told you earlier, I'm now thankful that I grew up in poverty because I see now I can connect the dots. I can see how every one of those experiences built character, it built work ethic. Because you see, when you're on a mountaintop and everything's glorious, all in the world you have is a glorious view and a glorious feeling. But where you build character and you build tenacity and you build determination is when you're in the valley and you're climbing up the mountain. When you get there, it's just a great view. That's it. And so you can, but it takes several years. You have to develop maturity before you can look back on the adversity and say, you know what? That's the best thing that ever happened to me.
That's such a great story. It's true. It's true. And we never know at the time why or what, but it's for something that will.
You have to walk through the fire. Jesus said, I didn't say it would be easy. I said it would be worth it.
There you go. So talk a little bit about the 4 truths of mindset, because that's something I think that's really important right now, and maybe share that with us.
Mindset is everything. Mm-hmm. And when COVID hit, when all this hit, I experienced fear for 4 days. And I allowed fear to control me for 4 days, which is really unusual for me because I can usually get rid of it in the first day, but I didn't. And my fear was that I would run out of money because I have 3 offices to support. I have a region I'm probably going to have to bolster, and I own a percentage of the international company, and I know we've taken a hit. And when you get a cash call from an international company, folks, it's in the millions, it's not in the thousands. So here I am with all this fear that I've saved enough money to get me through. Just fearful. I was crazy for 4 days. Have you ever had fear so bad that you were just a little stupid for 4 days? Well, let me tell you, I've had it just recently. And then on the 5th day, I thought about the 4 truths of mindset. Well, to get me through the fear at the end of the 4 days, on the 5th day, I remembered a little Bible verse that I had learned, and it says, "For God has not given you a spirit of fear." Well, brother, I had one, so it came from somewhere, but it wasn't God. Then the next line of the verse is, "He has given you a spirit of power, love, and of a sound mind." Well, power is when you feel the adrenaline flowing, and man, you can't wait to use your new script to pick up your phone and call your database. Call your sphere of influence. You know when you have power, and confidence gives you power. Man, you have power when you're confident. And so I said that little verse over and over. For God has not given me a spirit of fear. He's given me power, love, and a sound mind. And I thought, the 4 truths of mindset, because a sound mind and mindset are totally related. Well, truth number one, write this down if you have a pencil and paper. By changing your mind, you change your circumstances. Duh. By changing your mind, you change your circumstances. We have an agent in Michigan who was filled with fear, and he said he thought he was going to lose all this business during coronavirus. And he changed his mind and thought, you know what? I believe I can get 10 listings in a week by calling my sphere of influence. He ended up getting 11 listings, and he never had to go in any of the houses he listed because it was all done by virtual stuff. Change your mind, you change your circumstances. Truth number 2, when you believe something to be true, it causes adrenaline to flow, and it stimulates your senses. And when you believe it to be true, you just start doing the stuff that helps make it come true. When you believe something to be true, it causes adrenaline and stimulates your senses. Well, we had an agent who believed it would be true that he could sell rental property during this environment. He believed that a grandparent should buy a rental house if they had a young grandchild. And then when the parents, it would give them something to do, just one. And then when the child grew up, they could sell the house, put the money in the college fund. Well, this guy, because he believed this would be true, he sold a whole bunch of listings that the market center had to grandparents who still have money. Some of them lost a lot in the, stock market crash, but some of them still have money. And he just calls his sphere of influence and he says, do you know any grandparents that would be interested in buying a rental and then selling it when their little grandchild goes to college? You can't believe the names he's gotten. So when you believe something to be true, it will cause you to have adrenaline and confidence to go do it. All right, truth number 3. When the alligators are nipping at you, write that down. While you write it down, I'm going to talk about what the alligators may be saying to you. Maybe one alligator's nipping at your foot and it's saying to you, you're going to run out of money before COVID is over. Another one's saying, you're going to lose some more sellers. You're going to lose some more buyers before COVID is over. Another one says to you, you've been cooped up in this house for 2 months and you're sick of your husband and you wish he would go to the post office for 3 hours and give you a break. Or maybe another alligator is saying to you young mothers, I have to teach my kids, I have to cook 3 meals a day, I have to call my sphere of influence, I have to do things with my husband. I am just flat overwhelmed. Or maybe another alligator is saying something else to you. When the alligators are nipping at your feet, now here, write this down. The hardest thing to do in the world is have a positive mindset. It's hard. Nobody said it would be easy. It's hard. But boy, it's worth it when you change that mindset. This leads me to the 4th truth. See, you learned this in Quantum Leap if you took it in the old book, but they took this out in the new book, Deb, and I'm going to make them put it back in because it's one of the most powerful things that I've ever learned that has affected my ability to raise myself above whatever was happening, the adversity that was happening. Okay, truth number 4. Your mind is a part of you. It isn't you, it's just a part of you. Like your feet are a part of you, your hands are a part of you, your ears are a part of you. Well, guess what? Your mind is a part of you. And because it's a part of you, it should be your servant, not your master. See, I allowed fear to be my master for 4 solid days. I wasted 4 beautiful, solid days by allowing my mind filled with fear to control me. And then when I said that little Bible verse over and over and over and over, I started thinking, you know what? I know where this fear is coming from, and it's not from God. Because you see, we get ideas and thoughts from good forces, we get them from bad forces, we get them from our friends, we get them from all over the place. And I said to my mind on the morning of the 5th day, mind, you don't get to choose what you think. I get to choose what you think. You are my servant. You are not my master. So we're going to think positive thoughts. I do have enough money saved to get me through. And if I don't, the good Lord will somehow provide. I don't know how he'll do it, but he'll do it. And I got my head screwed on straight again on that 5th day because I didn't allow it to be my master any longer. Wow. Those are the 4 truths of mindset.
That was really, really powerful, Mo. I think we, really powerful. Thank you. I think this is going to get a lot of traffic. We're sending this out on Facebook, and I think you're going to be touching a lot of people. It was really a powerful session. Do you have time for questions if we open it up for questions?
Sure,
or have we taken up too much?
Sure.
That's wonderful. We'll watch the chat. Or you could actually unmute yourself and ask her a question if you'd like.
Oh, I love the chat. Mindset is everything. It starts inside. What's crazy, Julie, I love this. What's crazy is it is literally that simple. We complicate it. You are so right. I love it. I love it. These are great comments. So give me your questions.
You can unmute yourself. Can you guys unmute yourself or no?
Tough love is what's missing in business now and in some of our homes. And the hammer has to come down. And that is so true. But you have to put love first, then use the hammer, and then use love some more. For example, if your ALC member didn't give you a lead for that week, you call them in, the team leader calls them in and says, Joe, do you know you're one of my best ALC members? I love the way you think. I love the way you contribute. But darling, well, I can get by with saying darling because I'm going to be 83. I don't know if you can get by with it or not. But darling, here's the deal. You haven't given me a lead this week, and that is unacceptable. I am not going to let you cheat your family again. So I ask you, before you go home, will you go to your desk, use the phone, call somebody in another company that you've had a deal with that you really like them, and get permission for me to call? Will you do that for me? And of course, if he is a leader, he's going to say, yes, I'll do that for you. If he's not, if he isn't a leader, he'll say, no, I don't want to do that. And then I'll say as team leader, well, sweetheart, we're not a match. I just thank you so much for serving on the ALC. But if you want to go cheat your family week after week, no, we're not a match. Do you get my point? The hammer comes out. And yet I'm still going to love him. And when he says yes, then I say, Joe, I knew you'd take the high road. I knew you'd do the right thing for your family, because profit share is really for you causing the dreams to come true in your family. It's just that simple. Love, deal with the issue, and then love. Love, the hammer, then love.
The velvet hammer. I'm wondering, can you guys not unmute yourself? No. Sabrina, can you?
I just fixed it. Everybody should be able to.
So now you guys can. So whoever wants to ask Mo a question.
Any questions? I love questions.
Oh, she's asking
Ask me a
if you could
question.
redo the alligator truth number 3, the ending of it. Leah is.
Alligator,
Number 3.
truth number 3. When the alligators are nipping, remember, the hardest thing you will ever do is create a positive mindset. See, you have to get the alligators away. You have, so to speak, you have to start thinking positive and put positivity in your mind. Now, I happen to use a Bible verse on the COVID thing. Other times I might be just using a positive statement. You know, there are a lot of different things you can use. A quote from somebody.
So we have some questions coming in. For some reason,
Great.
we can't unmute them, but we're going to just ask the question.
Great.
The question is about standards, but they're writing too many questions, so I have to go back and find it. How do you have clarity around your standards, and how do you create your standards, Mo?
Actually, standards come from your belief system. That's why faith, whatever you choose, whatever your faith is, whether it's Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, whatever it is, that's why it's so important, because we all develop our values from our faith, and we develop our standards from our values. Now, if you're an atheist, your standards will be probably different because you don't have that faith to draw from. But that's where they actually come from. It's first values, and then you develop your standards from your values.
So we have another
Get
question.
that?
Ooh, I can unmute now. Can I just say, that was my question, Mo. Thank you so much. And that makes a lot of sense that they come from your values.
And your values come from your belief system or your faith, your worldview. I have a Judeo-Christian worldview. So a lot of the things taught in the Judeo-Christian faith, those are my values. And then my standards come from my values, like the poor kids that I taught. My standard was, I want you to experience what it feels like to do something really good, because I wanted so much to lift those kids up out of that poverty mentality, because I knew what it was like. Whereas a lot of modern day teachers, they don't want to be hard on those little poor kids because they have such a tough life. Well, I'm going to be hard on them because they are able to take it, because they have a tough life. And then see, they grow in confidence and more confidence and more confidence.
Nice. We have a question from Nate. I don't know if he can unmute himself or if I'll ask it.
Good. I'm good. Mo, I got to say it's an absolute honor to be talking to such a legend as yourself. So this is
Oh,
huge. Thank you so much.
You're so sweet.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah. So
give you a kiss.
it's all good. Virtual kiss. I'll take it. So how do you kind of bring your team up? You know, if they're having a hard time and kind of in that negative mindset, what do you do to bring them out of the fire and into the light? I think that we all can kind of relate to that. We've all got people that are underneath us that we're trying to bring to the top with us, you know?
Well, I challenge them. And as you've learned on this call, there's really only one way to do it. I've given you two examples. One was act enthusiastic, and then that reality will be real inside you. The other one is to affirm, a positive affirmation. You say it over and over. With me, I had to say, we're going to build back better than before. I had to say it over 1,000 times before I really began to believe it. And what I used to do when I ran an office 100 years ago, I would share my wisdom with the agent. And it was always a 3 strikes and you're out kind of deal. And then the agent would come in. For example, let's say an agent is belly aching, you know, they're whining and complaining because they don't have any business. Well, it's because they're not lead generating. And it's because probably the team leader didn't make it clear when they were brand new and interviewing that this isn't the real estate business. This is a lead generating business. It just happens to be in selling houses. And so they would come in and whine, and I would say, well, okay, let's talk about what you need to do to fix this. And we would talk about, you know, back then I did encourage 2 hours a day of lead generation. Well, then in 2 weeks, you know, they'd come back and whine again. Well, did you do your 2 hours of lead generation? And they hadn't. And then on the 3rd time they came in, here was the velvet hammer. You know, I think you have so much ability, and I am so sad that you choose not to do the things that you need to do to develop your ability. But you know what? That's your choice. So we're really not a match. You're unwilling to make your 2 hours a day in your calls, or walk in a neighborhood, or whatever. I mean, there are a lot of ways to lead generate. And since this is causing you so much consternation, because this is the 3rd time we've had this conversation, I'm going to suggest to you that you think about it tonight. And you either get out of the business, or you do what you need to do to develop your talent and your ability. It's up to you. I can't do it for you. So there comes a point when you, this question, I don't know if I did or not.
Nate,
In other words, I would tell the team what they needed to do. But you see, the difference between me and a lot of team leaders, if you don't do it, I'm on your back like a tiger on a piece of meat.
Definitely. Thanks
And a
so
lot
much.
of team leaders are scared of agents. They're afraid they'll leave. Well, you know what? If you're not doing what you're supposed to do and I get on you and you leave, that is great because that saves me from having to de-hire you.
Amen. Yeah.
So
Pat,
see, I'm just stricter and tougher than most team leaders. But that would be life in my office. See, I could be sweet to you for about 3 days. And then if you won't do what you're supposed to do, I'm on you.
it's those standards, right? You
It's
stand
the
up for it.
standard. It's
Exactly
the
what it
standard.
is.
I'll never forget in the early days when I had my Edmond office and I had Keller Williams office and I had 50 people in it, and Gary had his Northwest office in Austin, and I was making more profit in my office with 50 people than he was with 150. Because see, I had standards. You either produce or you're out of here. I'm not going to let you cheat your family because you need to make a good living for your family. You need to make more money than you need. And here's how you can do it.
Awesome. Pat, I see you have a question. Can you unmute yourself and ask Mo? And if not, I'll ask a question for you. His question is, how do you push through a hard time and stay with your goals? How do you keep yourself motivated?
By positive thinking, by positive affirmations.
Mm-hmm. Julie, your question was sort of answered, but maybe you want to
It's a
elaborate.
discipline. It's a discipline that you develop. Excuse me, I interrupted you.
No, you answered my question. I just struggle with not giving up on people. And so giving them enough rope that they hang themselves eventually. So I get to get better at that. But I just want you to know, Mo, I've been a Keller Williams agent since 2001. And this is the first time I've really had an intimate interaction with you. And I think, you know, you're the queen of culture. And I love what you're saying because I think people hear what they want to hear when they hear the word culture. They pick the nice things, the don't curse at the office and pay somebody's bill and culture. And I think people take out the part about you have to lead gen 2 hours a day and you've got to also produce and take care of your family. And so I just love that you're saying that because that's just as much culture as telling somebody they did a good job. As a matter of fact, I think if you can't take care of your family, yeah, I mean, if you can't take care of yourself and your family, how could you possibly help anybody else? So kudos, thank you, and super appreciate it.
Super, super appreciate it. Do we have any other questions now that you guys can unmute yourself?
We have time for one more, and then I've got to go.
Any other questions? Man.
Amanda, you look so good on Zoom. Your lighting is great.
That's very nice. But I do appreciate your everything together, the balance. All that you said can be used, in my mind anyway, to your business strategy, your family, you're helping your community, all those mindsets and all those points that you brought out are so good in every aspect. And you learn them in one, then I think it'll be easier then to put it in the next section of your life and the next section, because I think balance is the hard thing to keep, but that helps if you use those strategies for each.
Yeah, developing a discipline about mindset. I wish I'd known that when I was 25. See, I didn't learn a lot of that until Quantum Leap. And I went through Gary's very first Quantum Leap class. And I'm telling you, it made a difference in my life. You cannot believe how important that discipline is. I hope you'll go home and teach these truths to your children and then give them examples in your own life where you did that and it worked and how it paid off.
Yeah.
It's just been wonderful being with you today. And Debbie, I'm so honored that you would invite me to be on a Zoom call with your people. I'm so grateful and so thankful. And I have loved our relationship we've been through thick and thin together in Keller Williams. We can kind of chuckle about all the thins and the thicks.
And the thins, yeah.
And I just think your people are wonderful, and I've just so enjoyed being with you today.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Mo.
everybody. Here's a hug. So give me one back.
Thank you so much.
Keep going.
Thank you very much.
Keep going.
Thank you so much, Mo.
I'll pat you on
Thank
the
you so
back.
much.
I love
Bye.
you
I
all.
want to meet you in person.
Oh, that would be so fun.
It's gonna happen. Watch, mark my words.
You just call me.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye, y'all.
Thank you, Mo.
Bye.